What if the scraggly, forgotten strip of ground running along the side of your house, the one you walk past every single day without a second glance, was actually one of the most productive food gardens you could ever grow, and it was already building itself without you lifting a single finger? Most people view gardening as a high-maintenance transaction. You provide endless water and labor, or the finicky annual crops die. However, there is a better way. Perennial edible greens are ancient survivors that endured ice ages and severe droughts. They require zero coddling, no fertilizer, and minimal watering once established. A startling number of these resilient, nutrient-dense plants are already growing wild and ignored across America. Instead of burning out on high-maintenance vegetables, you can utilize these self-renewing, permanent harvests in your yard's forgotten corners. Here are 7 tough perennial greens that will do the heavy lifting for you, providing free food and medicine year after year without the fuss. Let's start with the one most people have been pulling out of their lawns their entire lives without ever once thinking to eat it. Broadleaf plantain. And before anyone gets confused, this is not the banana-like fruit from the tropics. Plantain here refers to Plantago major, a flat, low-growing perennial with wide oval leaves and distinctive parallel veins running the length of each blade. It grows in compacted soil. It grows in gravel driveways. It grows in the beaten-down path between your garage and your back door. It grows, essentially, wherever other plants have given up. Broadleaf plantain has one of the longest documented histories of any medicinal and edible plant in North America. Native American tribes used it extensively, and European settlers, who actually spread it so widely across the continent that it eventually earned the nickname white man's footprint, relied on it for everything from wound treatment to digestive complaints to respiratory issues. The leaves contain aucubin, a compound with demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties, as well as allantoin, which promotes cell regeneration and is still used in commercial skincare products today. That's not folk mythology, that's biochemistry. For food, the young leaves are the ones you want. Pick them in early spring when they're small, tender, and bright green. They have a mild, slightly earthy flavor that works well raw in salads, blended into smoothies, or wilted briefly into a stir-fry. As the leaves age and grow larger, they get tough and stringy, with prominent ribs that are unpleasant to chew. At that stage, strip the greens off the central rib and cook them the way you'd treat any tough cooking green. Sautéed with garlic and olive oil, simmered into a soup, or folded into a frittata. To establish plantain in your side yard, you barely need to try. Scatter seeds in a disturbed, preferably compacted area, water once, and walk away. Within a season or two, you'll have a persistent colony that returns every spring without any input from you. If your side yard already has compacted soil, which most do, plantain may already be there waiting. Not far behind plantain in terms of sheer nutritional punch is common dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. And if you're the kind of person who has spent money on herbicides trying to eradicate it from your lawn, I want you to take a deep breath, because we're about to reframe everything you thought you knew about this plant. Dandelion is not a weed problem. Dandelion is a free grocery store, and it is one of the most nutritionally complete plants that grows in the American landscape. The leaves are richer in beta-carotene than carrots. They contain more calcium by weight than milk. They are a significant source of vitamins K, C, and E, and they have more iron than spinach. Every part of the plant is edible: the leaves, the flowers, the roots. And every part has a documented history of use going back centuries across multiple continents. The leaves are best in early spring before the plant sends up a flower stalk. At that point, they're still relatively mild, with a pleasant bitter edge that pairs beautifully with something sweet or acidic. A honey lemon vinaigrette, a handful of dried cranberries, a sharp cheddar crumbled over the top. Once the plant flowers, the leaves intensify significantly in bitterness. That's not a deal breaker. Bitterness in food is actually a signal of phytonutrient density. But it does mean you'll want to balance them with richer ingredients. Blanching them briefly in boiling water and then cooking them in olive oil with garlic and red pepper flakes is the classic preparation, and it's a genuinely delicious one. The flowers can be eaten raw, tossed into salads for color and a faint honey-like sweetness, or used to make dandelion wine, which has a long American history. The roots, dug in fall when they're at their starchiest and most bitter, can be roasted and ground as a caffeine-free coffee substitute that's actually quite good. Dandelion is perennial, deeply tap-rooted, and virtually impossible to kill once established. It will naturalize in any lawn or garden bed with well-drained soil and a reasonable amount of sun. It seeds itself aggressively, which means once you have a few plants, you'll have more every year without any effort on your part. Moving along the fence line, we come to wood sorrel, specifically the yellow-flowered Oxalis stricta that grows across most of the United States as a common lawn and garden volunteer. It's a dainty-looking plant with clover-like leaves in groups of 3 and tiny yellow flowers. And it has one of the most immediately appealing flavors of any wild green you'll find. Bright, clean, and intensely lemony. That sourness comes from oxalic acid, the same compound found in spinach and chard and rhubarb. Like those plants, wood sorrel should be eaten in reasonable quantities rather than by the bucketful. Large amounts of oxalic acid can interfere with calcium absorption. But as a culinary accent and seasonal green eaten in normal serving sizes, it's completely safe and genuinely delightful. The lemon flavor it imparts to food is not metaphorical. It is actually acidic in a way that can brighten a dish the way a squeeze of citrus would. In the kitchen, wood sorrel shines as a finishing herb. Tear the leaves over grilled fish, scrambled eggs, or roasted vegetables right before serving. Blend it into a green sauce with olive oil, garlic, and salt. Float a few sprigs on a bowl of cold soup. It also makes a lovely addition to drinks. A handful of leaves steeped in cold water gives you a naturally lemony infusion that needs no sweetener to taste refreshing. Wood sorrel is a perennial in most of its range, dying back in winter and re-emerging in spring from persistent roots. It prefers partial shade, which makes it especially valuable for those side yards that don't get full sun all day. It naturalizes easily, spreads gradually, and requires absolutely nothing in the way of care once it gets going. If you already have it growing somewhere on your property, consider it already established. Here's one that raises eyebrows every single time it comes up. But bear with me, because once you understand what you're dealing with, you will never look at this plant the same way again. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, is one of the most nutritious leafy greens that exists anywhere in the world. And it grows wild across most of the northern half of the United States, typically in moist, nitrogen-rich soil near streams, fence lines, and disturbed ground. Yes, it stings. The leaves and stems are covered in tiny hollow silica needles that inject a cocktail of compounds including histamine, serotonin, and formic acid when they come into contact with skin. The sting is sharp, burning, and lasts anywhere from a few minutes to several hours depending on individual sensitivity. This is the plant's defense mechanism, and it is extremely effective, which is exactly why the plant has survived so successfully in the wild. But here's the thing, cooking or drying stinging nettle completely neutralizes the sting. Every single one of those hollow needles collapses in heat or in the drying process, and what you're left with is a mild, deeply savory green that tastes something like a cross between spinach and cucumber, with an umami depth that most greens simply don't have. It's higher in protein than almost any other leafy vegetable. It's an excellent source of iron, magnesium, potassium, calcium, and vitamins A, C, and K. It has been used since at least the Bronze Age as both food and medicine, and in many parts of Europe it's still harvested commercially. Pick the tops in spring wearing gloves and long sleeves. The young growing tips, the top 4 to 6 inches of new growth, are the most tender and the most nutritious. Blanch them in boiling water for 2 to 3 minutes, drain, squeeze out excess moisture, and use them exactly as you'd use cooked spinach. Nettle soup is a classic preparation, genuinely hearty and satisfying. Nettle tea made from dried leaves is a traditional remedy for seasonal allergies that actually has some clinical backing. Nettle pesto, made by substituting blanched nettles for basil in your standard recipe, is something food people tend to serve at dinner parties without telling anyone what's in it, and the response is universally enthusiastic. To establish nettles in your yard, plant rooted divisions in a moist, partially shaded spot. They spread by underground rhizomes and will expand their colony each year. They do need more moisture than some of the other plants on this list, so a low spot or an area near a downspout is ideal. Once established, they are completely self-sufficient and will return reliably every spring. Lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album, is so productive and so nutritious that it's almost embarrassing that it's classified as a weed. This is a tall, upright annual that reseeds so aggressively it behaves like a perennial, showing up in the same spots year after year from a seed bank that builds up in the soil over time. It's related to spinach, chard, and quinoa, which should tell you something about its nutritional profile. And it tastes like a milder, more refined version of spinach with a slightly earthy, mineral quality that makes it enormously versatile in the kitchen. The leaves have a distinctive dusty, grayish-white coating on their undersides, which is one of the easiest ways to identify the plant. They grow quickly, reaching 4 to 6 feet tall by midsummer in good conditions, though you can keep them cut back to encourage fresh growth throughout the season. The leaves are best when harvested young and tender from the growing tips, but they remain usable well into the summer if you keep cutting them back. Nutritionally, lamb's quarters exceeds spinach in calcium, iron, and vitamins A and C. It contains complete protein, meaning it provides all the essential amino acids in proportions that are genuinely impressive for a leafy green. Indigenous peoples across North America used it extensively as both a staple food and a medicine, and it was eaten by early European settlers when other food sources were scarce. Eat it raw in salads when young and tender. Sauté it with oil and garlic. Add it to soups, egg dishes, pasta, and grain bowls. The seeds, which develop in dense clusters by late summer, can be harvested, dried, and ground into a flour that works in flatbreads and porridges, the same way its close relative quinoa is used. It has a mild enough flavor that it disappears seamlessly into most dishes, making it one of the most culinarily useful plants on this entire list. To get lamb's quarters going in your side yard, scatter seeds in disturbed soil and let the season do the rest. Once you have a colony established, you'll never need to plant it again. It reseeds itself with extraordinary efficiency and will show up every spring as reliably as the sunrise. Let's talk about chicory, Sicorium intybus, because this is a plant with a legitimate cultural history in America that most people have completely forgotten. Chicory is the plant whose roots were roasted and mixed with coffee during the Civil War era when coffee was scarce, and it became such an established part of New Orleans food culture that it's still used there today. The roasted root gives a slightly bitter, woody flavor that deepens coffee without the caffeine. But long before it became a coffee extender, chicory was a food plant in its own right, eaten across Europe and the Middle East going back to ancient Egypt. The wild form of chicory grows along roadsides, fence lines, and unmowed areas across virtually the entire continental United States. It's the plant with the intense sky blue flowers that open in the morning and close by early afternoon. One of the most reliably beautiful wildflowers in the American landscape, and one of the most overlooked. It grows tall and branching, reaching 3 to 5 feet in a good spot, with rough dandelion-like basal leaves and smaller leaves clasping the stem higher up. All of these leaves are edible, though they are bitter, uncompromisingly so if you eat them raw without any preparation. The classic approach is to blanch them briefly in salted boiling water, drain, and then cook them a second time in olive oil with garlic, lemon juice, and a pinch of red pepper flakes. This double cooking process significantly tames the bitterness while preserving the nutritional value, and the result is a complex, deeply flavored dish that holds its own against any cultivated green. The basil leaves in early spring, before the plant sends up its flowering stalk, are the most tender and mildest of the season. Chicory is a true perennial with a deep taproot that makes it extremely drought tolerant. Once planted, it will return for many years with zero maintenance. It thrives in poor, dry soil. Exactly the kind of soil that runs along the sides of houses and driveways. It tolerates compaction, neglect, and moderate shade. Plant seeds or transplant divisions in fall or early spring, water until established, and then essentially forget about it. The last plant on our list is one that home cooks have started rediscovering in recent years, partly because high-end restaurants started featuring it, and partly because people are finally getting curious about what all those unidentified ground cover plants in their yards actually are. Purslane, Portulaca oleracea, is a low-growing, succulent-leafed plant that sprawls across bare and disturbed ground in warm weather, with thick, rubbery stems, paddle-shaped fleshy leaves, and a moisture content so high that it almost feels wet when you squeeze it. Purslane is extraordinary for one specific reason that sets it apart from every other plant on this list. It is the single richest plant-based source of omega-3 fatty acids in existence. We're talking about the same anti-inflammatory, heart-protective fatty acids you get from eating salmon and sardines, concentrated into a humble little ground cover weed that requires absolutely no care whatsoever. It also contains significant amounts of vitamins A, C, and E, as well as magnesium, calcium, potassium, and glutathione, a powerful antioxidant. For a plant that most American homeowners spend their summers trying to remove from their vegetable beds, this is a genuinely remarkable nutritional profile. The flavor is mild and slightly tangy, with a pleasant succulent crunch that holds up well in salads without getting wilted the way more delicate greens do. It pairs naturally with tomatoes, cucumbers, red onion, feta, and a simple lemon vinaigrette, a combination popular across the Middle East and Mediterranean for centuries. It can be pickled in a light brine for a few hours and served alongside fatty meats as a refreshing counterpoint. It can be stirred into soups and stews in the last minute of cooking, where its natural mucilaginous quality helps thicken the broth slightly. It can be lightly sautéed with garlic and eaten as a side dish. Purslane behaves as an annual in most of the country, but reseeds itself so prolifically that it functions like a perennial in practice. Once you have it on your property, you will always have it. It thrives in poor, dry, hot conditions. Neglected side yards are essentially its native habitat. If you don't already have it, scatter seeds on bare, sunny ground in late spring after the soil has warmed. It will germinate quickly, grow aggressively, and be ready to harvest within weeks. 7 plants. 7 ancient survivors that have been feeding and healing people for centuries, growing wild in the margins and forgotten corners of the American landscape, asking nothing from you in return. Broadleaf plantain, dandelion, wood sorrel, stinging nettle, lamb's quarters, chicory, and purslane. Every single one of them either already growing on your property or ready to establish itself with minimal effort and zero ongoing care. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The model of gardening most of us have inherited is fundamentally backwards. We've been told that productivity requires effort, that you only get out what you put in, that the garden will fall apart the moment you turn your back. And that may be true for the tender annuals that dominate the seed catalogs, the tomatoes and peppers and basil and lettuce that have been bred over generations for flavor and size at the expense of resilience. But these plants operate on a completely different set of rules. They reward strategic neglect. The less you interfere with them, the more deeply they root, the more freely they spread, the more abundantly they produce. They are making their own food from sunlight and soil and rainwater, running an entirely self-sufficient operation in the strip of ground beside your house that you currently consider worthless. Your side yard is not dead space. It's a battlefield where some of the toughest plants on Earth have already been winning for thousands of years. All you have to do is stop fighting against them and start harvesting what they've been trying to give you all along. The best sustainable garden isn't the one you build from scratch with raised beds and drip irrigation and expensive soil amendments. Sometimes it's the one that was already there, quietly doing its job, waiting for you to finally pay attention.